I am unashamed. What about you?
So I got my last event coming up. I'm not going to tell you where it's at because it's sold out, which is good. That's a good problem. But I don't want you showing up banging on the door.
What state are we in?
We're in Texas.
Texas.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure.
And you're doing it with Missy?
I'm doing it with Missy.
How do you, now, Lisa and I do a lot of ours together, so we're pretty good. But
I said this last podcast that courage manifests itself in strange ways. Sometimes admitting your weakness takes a lot more courage than jumping off a bridge if you think you can make it.
Right.
Or jumping off a cliff, which I have done and survived and thought, that was dumb. Didn't take courage, it just took stupidity. But
I did the same thing. We were in a fishing tournament one time, and then we went swimming. We were young. And so I just ran and jumped off into the creek, from a pretty tall bluff. What I didn't know was the water was about less than a foot deep.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I sprained both my ankles. Yeah, I mean, I could have really been bad.
BJ.
So why would you jump off a high?
Because I was an idiot. I mean,
that's why I said,
you go down there and you check the water before you.
Was it BJ before Jesus? Is what I was asking.
Well, it was before I went out like bad. I was probably about 12.
You were young, reckless, and bored.
I just was stupid. You just don't.
Willie and I were driving down the river in a boat, and I saw a rope on the top of that cliff down there.
Oh boy!
Somebody put a rope up there. I mean, it was. I mean,
that's a high bluff.
I know where the bayou, that little bayou runs in there.
So Willie and
I call it. Well, I used to call it when I was running nests, the bluff.
Yep.
Yeah. So I got up there.
Not many bluffs in Louisiana.
And Willie, he's like, "You go first." And I was like,
"I'll watch you."
No, that's not what. You know how Willie is. He said that way, if it doesn't go well, I can get help. What I tell you?
That kind of terminology is worthy of note.
Man, I hit that water. And that's where I learned that although water looks soft and
it's really not.
Fluid, no, it's like
it's very dense.
Jumping. And so after I could speak, which took a few seconds, he said, "How was it?" I said, "Great." But I was thinking that was the worst thing I've ever done. But I wanted him to hit it, So I said, "I'll be down there." No, it wasn't bad. And then he hit it. And then we both said, "What? Did it hurt like that when you hit?" I said, "Absolutely."
But you didn't tell him because you wanted him to do it.
Because I wanted him.
Pain brings forth many things.
I needed someone to share in my pain. That's the spiritual application. So I had an epiphany last night because I got panic. I get a little panicky and nervous about speaking with my wife because the first time we did it, I thought it went great. People, I could tell they were moving. I thought, "Whoa, we're making the world a better place for Jesus speaking through us." We got in the car, and Missy said, "You gonna let me talk now?" And I was looking around like, "Well, that's not very nice to say to the driver." I thought she was
this
talking
is when you're in your rig leaving.
Yeah, we're leaving. She's like, "Can I talk now?" And I was like, "About what?" And she kind of laughed, She wasn't being mean.
So basically, she was saying you kind of made an effort to steal the show.
Yeah, that you were maybe.
And I thought, "Well, you did talk." I said, "Well, I thought you were talking." She's like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." So I thought, oh man, what? I was trying to read, but you know how because I've shared this many times. My biggest problem was like overcoming the fear of speaking in front of people, and so it's all a blur to me. I'm kind of a mess inside, so I'm not. That's like when people say, "Well, when you said that part about whatever," even if I had notes, I'm like, "No, I don't remember. I have once I leave, it's over." So then I was trying to think back, and I was like, "I'm telling you, I remember her speaking." So we tried it again, and same thing. She's like, you're not letting me talk." I was like, Well, I was trying to this
It
time.
sounds like to me, if this is an upcoming date, you're still in the same position you've been in all along.
Yeah. So here's what I did. So I reach out to our assistant, which is family. It's her aunt. I said, why don't you ask them if they want to do a Q&A? And she's like,
that's smart.
We're 2 days before the event. She put a, we're 2 days before the event. I said, well, ask them, because I didn't even acknowledge that. So long story short, after a few phone calls and messages, it's like, all right, we're doing the Q&A. Because I thought maybe that'll make it, because I'm trying to accommodate my lovely wife. She's awesome. But she's like, if we get up there and give a speech, because it's like, how do you really prepare for that anyway?
Yeah.
It's hard for two to give the same speech.
Right.
It just,
Well, Lisa and I do it all the time, but the only way it works for us, and probably it'd be like this with y'all, Jays, if you weren't doing it Q&A style, is that like I do a open. So I talk about the family. I got some funny stuff in there, and so I kind of get everybody warmed up. So I do about 15 minutes open, and she's there with me, and she may chime in a little bit, but she doesn't say much, and then I turn it over to her. And then she goes 15 minutes. She's got her thing. She does.
So maybe I should do that at some point.
And then
maybe I should ask
usually
me
wrap
a
it,
question, and I say, I'm going to turn this over to the expert in this.
That's right. That's what I would do.
Then I'm like, that way, because she can't say, well, how come you put me on the spot? I'm like, you wanted to talk. You wanted to talk more.
So go.
I'm going to try it. Well, the reason
I
I'm
don't
bringing...
like that arrangement.
No, it wouldn't work with you and Mom.
Me and Miss Kay,
but you and Mom have done Q&As before that were very effective. I mean, because they're just asking questions.
Do you know what's weird? Is this is my last event.
I know.
Because I had to pause all.
Because of the show.
I appreciate all the requests and people, and but yeah, well, I'm doing this show, and that's still coming along. We did the promos. I talked a little bit about that. And by the way, I forgot to tell you this. Most of these people that did those promos the other day, they were not familiar. Well, before I say this, we were out in the middle of a field, cows everywhere, and they had all these high-powered equipment and everything. They were not familiar with ants, had no concept of them. Because the photographer, this was day 2, this guy was like down, he'd be just rolling around on the ground. We're doing all these
and they're not
weird
and
things.
they're not well versed on fire ants.
No, so I looked down, and I saw one of his legs that looked like turned red, and I said, "You're in ants." And he was like, "What's this? There's a stinging sensation." He said, "There's a stinging sensation." I said, "There's 1,000 ants on you." Well, then when I got to looking at both of his arms, he just had the little pimples all over him from the day before. I said, "You remember yesterday when you had the stinging?"
Why is that so funny to me?
Oh, I don't know. Everybody else was
This
laughing.
is when L.A. meets L.A. L.A. to Louisiana.
The other LA.
Well, I said, those things are toxic. Well, when I said that, look, he said, do I need to go to the hospital? But now he's full scale getting them off of him because they're stinging.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we're going to sit here and see if you're allergic to them.
That's right.
But if you start turning a different color than red, we may take you to the hospital.
If your tongue gets so thick you can't breathe,
Get enough,
But
get
then
enough bites, it's pretty
it
rough.
started a series of conversations where they were all inspecting themselves, and they're like, I got them too. It was like they had, some kind of zombie polio, because they were noticing
And
all
every
the
bite,
pimples.
every bite turns into a little zit.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Every one of them.
Well, they're very toxic.
And they were like,
Thankfully, they're little, or we'd be in trouble.
It's two weeks to a month for all that to go away. It's a pretty rough deal.
Yeah, so I did find that fascinating. I was like, you don't have ants in L.A.?
They did go to the hospital, the Duck Dynasty crew, multiple times. We would just go through, but some of them called me up there and they said, why is it that we're just being eaten alive with all these things in that grass out there? Now, these little chicks were out there, the Los Angeles
The
chicks.
little shorts, yeah.
Yeah, they had the little shorts and the bare legs, look at me. and they're walking around out through the weeds, and we're walking around out there, and no one is even touched by these fire ants because we just got
we know what to avoid.
Yeah.
Well, you see an ant
they
bed.
did end up in the hospital. They, they were just, I mean, torn up.
I know it, and it's sad, but I guess we're so used to it. I tell people all the time, and they think,
said, "Why are they not on you?" And I said,
But you don't realize you're avoiding them without noticing. Because look, so we had this happen. We're all laughing at their pain, and
which is part of the fun, you know.
yeah, and nobody was allergic beyond. I mean, other than they're getting all the zits on them and all, and so it's funny. But then the next shoot, because then we all go back to the little trailer and hang out, and then they go set up the next shoot.
Right.
And so they put little, because these are like movie-like commercials where it's a little spoof. It's 15 seconds, but they set up for them for an hour.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
They got they have it well lit. They have cameras and.
Got to be perfect.
Yeah, everything's. So we go to the next one where everybody's standing, and they have me standing on top of a huge ant bed. They literally had an X. They put little X's where you stand.
on the fire ant bed.
You could barely see it because it was encased in ants. And I said, "Hey, same problem. I'm not standing here." And they're like, y'all have an ant problem.
You think?
I said, "This is Earth. This is we are here on Earth. We're in a place where concrete doesn't cover up all the critters." I guess. I mean, do they not have ants in L.A.?
I guess not. But I tell people all the time that Louisiana, I mean, almost everything in the wild can hurt you and will hurt you.
Yeah.
I mean, you
A lot
have
of
to.
stinging things.
Yeah, a lot of stinging.
Well, I've said before that if you wanted to inflict pain on someone, you don't have to do anything. You could just tie them up out in the woods.
Yeah.
Because something will get you.
But Dad, you remember you and I went to Angola and spoke in the prison, and you know they just there's not even they got the wall when you first get there, but the rest of it's just open.
Yeah.
And the Mississippi River's over there. So some guys, that's probably been 20 years ago, you know, they tried to take off. Well, one of them got out there, and I mean, he was almost dead.
Yeah.
From everything that got him. Remember they said they found him, he was half dead, and he was like, "Get me back in the prison."
Yep.
Because what I've gotten into out here.
It is rough, especially in the
They don't
summer.
have a fence. They just have the territory.
That's exactly right. And you it's rough.
Spring and summer where we're from, I mean, even our place over here, you stay away from there in the spring and summer. Don't be venturing out off of a road.
That's right.
I mean, you just won't be in good health.
No, the stuff is here to hurt you. That's what it does.
It's a jungle.
That's
So I told you all that because the next time we're together, I'll give you a report and see how it goes.
right.
But yeah, I'm nervous about it. But we are doing the Q&A thing.
Yeah,
but they're
I
like, "Well, we want you to share Jesus." I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to share Jesus. That's what I'm coming out there for."
Yeah.
Because they thought, well, if we do Q&A, that might hurt that. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's all we got.
Yeah. Just set me up with that question and I'll go. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Jace, I got my last one too coming up for a while. May the 4th, I think. It's the first Thursday. It's National Day of Prayer. So I'm going to be speaking at the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast in Ashland, Ohio. So if you're from that area around Ashland, that's why I'll be on that first. I think it's like 6:30 in the morning. It's a prayer breakfast. It's funny because this is an event that I was scheduled to do 3 years ago. And it's just pushed every year because of COVID, and they just, kept rolling it down. So we're finally going. Same thing, the one I just did in Pennsylvania. I mean, I got up there and I was like, well, this has been 3 years just in the makings, boys, but here we go. Let's see what we can do. But they were excited about doing it. Let's take a break. So it seems like every day we hear about another corporation that goes woke. It's just kind of part of our culture. It's what we have to deal with. And I really feel bad for people that work in these environments because then you have all these, it goes against your belief system, our country, our traditional values, our Constitution sometimes even. One of our sponsors that we're glad to support is a company called Patriot Mobile. And they bill themselves as America's only Christian conservative cell phone provider. I know, Dad, this doesn't really apply to you. You're not a cell phone guy, but for everybody else that has a cell phone, these guys, but they agree with a lot of the same stuff that we do. They have a plan that fits any budget. They have a 100% U.S.-based customer service support team, which is very nice when you have issues that you can call and talk to an American. Patriot Mobile shares your values. It supports organizations fighting for religious freedom, constitutional rights, sanctity of life. They also do great by our veterans and first responders. So I want you to check these guys out, patriotmobile.com/Phil, or you can call them at 972-PATRIOT. You get a free activation with the offer code Phil. And remember, they got even more savings for veterans and first responders. So patriotmobile.com/Phil, patriotmobile.com/Phil, or call them 972-PATRIOT. So yeah, I'm summers. I don't do as many events because people don't do banquets and stuff, which is kind of good because it gives me a break. But
Yeah,
you're kind of off the market for a while.
I'm off the market for a while, so we'll see if and I'll give you some details as the show gets closer. They're trying to figure out you film the show, and then you film the promo for the show, and then you do the marketing for the show. So we're planning that now. So I'll be on a few shows.
Oh, yeah. Well, I told people because they kept asking me, I said, well, just, hey, keep an eye on Fox because trust me, when they get ready to roll it out, it'll be everywhere.
Yeah, they sent me a list of shows that it's like, we want you to be on these. I'm like, I mean, the list was long.
Oh, yeah.
I said, let's just pick a few. So, because it's weird, our show is not really, well, it's not political at all. I mean, this is about, it's kind of an irony. I wore my, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The irony of the show is that we're finding lost treasure, but we're also acknowledging the treasure, the spiritual treasure, which is what we've been in 2 Corinthians 10. I mean, friendship, family.
But the show's a big deal for them because, Fox is trying to build their digital platform. So by having, this is the first really, thing that somebody's done from the old show other than what we've been doing here. But I mean, it's like a first official show. So I mean, it's a pretty big deal for fans and people that love the show to get to see people from, I think,
Yes.
I mean,
I hope people lower their expectations. It's a pretty simplistic show. It was hard to do, but because it was pretty much just.
I have to say, I mean, I watched the first episode and I thought it was really good. So, and I'm saying that not just because I'm promoting it. I mean, I genuinely thought it was good. I thought it was funny.
I've seen.
I love Murray. He's one of my favorite people. So I'm glad to see him.
I'll tell you this, Murray was. You never know. I mean, he hasn't really been on TV or whatever, but he's great.
Yeah.
And of course, the first day was bumpy.
Yeah.
Because we were, I guess I can share this now, but so the first day, he didn't realize kind of how things are. So this is day one. We get to the location, and they say, we wait around for 30 minutes. He's looking around like, what's the problem? Well, are we going to start? Then they say, I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to put some GoPros in these little cameras in your truck, and y'all can, drive around and describe what we're doing. So okay. And he said, well, that's, why are they doing that? I said, because they're not ready. They have a problem. Right. Which we later found out they didn't have any cameras.
Yeah.
And, they had GoPros.
Yeah.
They didn't, cameras didn't, there was a mix up somewhere. It's hard to film you when you need your camera.
Gotta have a camera.
It's like me going duck hunting without my duck calls or my gun.
That's right.
You're doing a reality show without cameras.
Yeah. So we got in the truck.
That's a little too real.
And I said, Murray, none of this will probably ever make the show.
Yeah,
but
just so
they didn't want to say, we've lost our cameras. So they said, why don't y'all drive around? I was like, they're just trying to get us,
we're not sitting around waiting on them.
So it's so funny. They put the cameras in. So we take off. It's me, Jeff, and Murray. And I was like, okay, boys, here we go. This is this is it. So Murray looks at the camera and he's like, ladies and gentlemen, I laughed so hard.
He was going to do a little monologue.
Well, he was like, this is this. He just went director, and it was like looking at the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here. We're headed. I said, Murray, you just be yourself.
Camera's not here.
We're not gonna look at the camera the whole time, and it was so funny.
Oh, man.
So we came a long way from day one, and he's like, "Well, how am I gonna be myself when I don't know what's fixing to happen?" I was like, "Well, you don't know what's fixing to happen in life." No, I said in life, you don't know what. You just be yourself. He's like, "Well, what if I don't have anything to say?" I said, "You don't have anything to say."
That's right.
And it was, it is a little, because people talk about unscripted shows. They're like, oh, that's what we want. Well, it's harder than you think.
Yeah.
Because you're not sure
Yeah.
what to say or when to say it.
Well, there's something about it when they tell you, because I remember all the times we used to do the show, so we'd have somebody on, and they would always tell them, "Now, don't look at the camera. Just it's not there. But it's funny you say that, and then people are like, they're drawn to it because they know they're not.
I wish you'd have been on our show this year. Or we tried. We invited you a couple times to supper, but you were out or whatever. But because in our show, it was okay to look at the camera.
Oh, that's good. So y'all kind of broke down the fourth wall.
We did.
Okay, good.
We just decided, we're not going to make this because you'll know.
Yeah.
You're not making this stuff up. We go out there, whatever we find, we find. What if we don't? We try to have something funny happen, or maybe, we try to be creative in what we do when we're out there, but we're kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Well, it's kind of like what we do on the podcast, and it's funny because every time I bring this up and I'm talking to somebody that loves our podcast, it's one of the things they love about it because we decided, remember early on, if something happens, it's just part of the podcast. If a wasp drops down and we got to kill the thing, that's part of the podcast. If the dogs are barking, that's part of the podcast. So I think it's better to just embrace it like that, instead of trying to be like.
So I'm a little nervous about promoting it because we're on a, channel that's mainly talk about politics or whatever. But this is a healthy distraction of the world's problems and disagreement.
But this has worked. We're on a political platform for Unashamed,
so we'll see.
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted, and I'll give you a report on how the event. But one thing I am going to do is I'm going to let her do all the talking she wants to do, and we're going to see how it works.
Yeah.
I think that in theory, but I've thought that every time, and it just get back to the.
I don't know, Jace. That'll be interesting. I can't wait to hear the next week.
She's not mad. She's just like, you gonna let me talk now? Or it's a free country. I thought you should talk.
One of my favorite lines from Missy ever was when Dad said something, and Missy looked around at Dad and she said, "I liked it better when you didn't talk." I got so tickled, because the dad usually ignores everything, but for whatever reason, he chimed in one time, and Missy just told him that, and I got so tickled. That was so funny.
No, you don't have to wonder what she's thinking. That's what I like about her.
Oh, yeah, she'll tell you.
So what I was going to do for our last segment in second.
We are wrapping Corinthians today, the Corinthian letter, so.
We are. And we're doing it in the positive. We kind of went over the negatives because we had the standards of the world. He makes that reference in chapter 10, which was a common reference, of having, the world functions differently than the church.
Yeah.
And we're glad for it. The weapons we fight with in this country.
Which, by the way, Jace, I don't think we ever said this, but really that's what this podcast is about, because we talk about being on a political platform, but we watch the political wars every day. That's not working.
Nope.
To change hearts and minds. Like, you got your position.
They can't remove sin, and they can't raise it.
So we have to raise the thing higher than politics.
By the way, Jace, wouldn't you say on the final 3 chapters that the Apostle Paul brought it all down together, and it's pretty caustic. He's talking about the people that are behind this movement at Corinth that's causing him trouble. And I'll keep on doing, this is 2 Corinthians 11, about verse 12. I'll keep on doing what I'm doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. For such men, I think this is the gist of what's going on here, big picture, in the 3 chapters, the wrap up. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It's not surprising then if his servants masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve. I think that's kind of he tends to wrap it all together on what's behind this, and he is saying all these problems that they're having, it's coming from the evil one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is a
I mean, you know all the texts about in Christ, they have lost their focus and don't realize that wherever you are at any time in your life, there is ongoing spiritual warfare.
Now let's take a break. So we got Mother's Day coming up. Jace, we'll need to remember that because, you know, moms love and wives love to be pampered a little bit on Mother's Day, and they deserve it, right?
Noted.
They raised us and raised our children. One of the things you might want to think about getting your mom is one of our sponsors is a company called Raycon, and they do wireless earbuds. And so, you know, a lot of people listen to our podcast out there. This would be a great thing to get for your wife or your mom to be able to listen to the Unashamed podcast. Plus, you can take phone calls, hands-free. A really, really good product. I wear them. I love it on the airplane because, you know, it tunes out all the noise that you get on there. They will not budge. They have optimized gel tips. They fit into your ear comfortably, which is important. So for mom or anybody else, you get 8 hours of playtime, 32-hour battery life. They've got a compact portable charging case, which is really good. Over 49,000 5-star reviews, so obviously they're good. So check them out. Tell your mom how much you love her, or your wife, or anybody, by going to buyraycon.com/unashamed. You can get 15% off a Mother's Day order, so you can save some money and give her a great gift. Buyraycon.com/unashamed. That's a very important point, Dad, because the people, the Corinthian church and the people there, even the ones that were giving him so much grief, he doesn't view them as enemies. He views the evil one as the
That is correct. So that's my point.
It's very important because what happens is, you know, we get so disappointed with people and frustrated, and we got to realize it's just the evil one working in someone. It's not, they're not the enemy. We want them to understand.
You take any scenario out throughout the Bible from start to finish, beginning with when Adam and Eve sinned, then the solution is someone from the seed of a woman will be born. You know, this was like 5,000-6,000 years in the making.
Yeah.
From all the Old Testament writings. I mean, it's 6,000 years.
Right.
You know, from Genesis all the way
to get to the point of what the promise
Matthew,
was.
Mark, Luke, and John. You're like, boy, I mean, this thing, it dragged on a long time.
It did.
Which is amazing. And then the results of it, he's dealing with it, but Satan is still there. But the good news is he's trying to get them to see, you know, like 1 Corinthians 15, look, you know, all your problems have been solved here.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to come together. And you need to love each other.
Right. Because his defeat is now known.
Yeah.
We no longer have a fear of death.
But it shows, too, how shrewd evil can be.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's little stuff that just all of a sudden it bubbles up and it just rots whatever it touches, you know.
Right.
You know, masquerades as an angel of light. You know, you just think about that. That's pretty good.
And by the way, we've been talking about spiritual warfare. If you want to read a really good book on spiritual warfare, Seeing the Unseen by Joe Beam. It's really the best I've ever read.
But there is a decision to be made, and we've talked about this before. The evil one can set up circumstances where temptation arises, but still ultimately God's given us the ability to choose. And in this case, you know, Jesus, when he would say, if you want to live, you got to die. You know, victory is the opposite of what you think from a spiritual standpoint when we're looking at a spiritual warfare. By surrendering to Christ, letting Him lead you, you're accessing the positive, because the negatives of what the worldly standards are, we've already addressed. They looked at the surface, only the surface of things. They wanted to look strong. And you never admit your weaknesses. No. You never want to show your
vulnerability.
Commend
yourself to yourself.
They commended themselves, verse 12. They measured themselves and compared themselves only with others or ultimately themselves.
Right.
But when you look at God's spiritual qualities and standards, you see in verse 4 of chapter 10 that we have divine power to demolish strongholds. You just think you have the knowledge of God, verse 5.
And you're going to need it too.
But that, you just think of a treasure trove that we have in truth, that you know that God is right.
Yeah.
So it's like when you're in an argument, I used to jokingly say you never want to argue with someone unless you know you're right. And the joke in that was, I'm getting my material from the creator of the universe. I know He's right.
Yeah.
So even though I can't, put God in a bottle and pour Him out for you to see and give you some kind of sign that, this is true, I know His principles are right and true, and they are righteous. So that's the shift in when you compare these things. And I have a list. That's one that God's power is driving this. Verse 5 is that
what are you in? What chapter are you
chapter 10.
Okay.
2 Corinthians 10.
Okay.
And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Of course, he's going to say that, and that's been the theme of this whole thing, that our filter in Christianity is Jesus Christ Himself. That's why we came up with that statement of what would Jesus do? But the better statement we've said before is, what is He doing?
Yeah.
So you can always look at the life of Jesus when you're talking about the standard versus the worldly standard. We have a person that by God's design and plan, woven through history, He gave us a model, an example that we compare everything to. If you don't know what to do about any subject under the sun, you can read the 4 Gospels, and I will guarantee you, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will come out with a way to handle it through the eyes of Jesus from a godly
because He's mistake-free.
Exactly.
Mistake-free.
But you think about that. What a filter that is.
Ooh.
It's awesome.
Every thought captive.
Well, think about it. The world has no standard. They're trying to come up with a standard to achieve these principles, even sometimes love and equality and whatever you want to fill in.
Equity.
But they don't have a standard they can agree on.
Correct.
Because of all the corruption and flaws in the process.
Yep.
Because it's then subjective to whatever somebody thinks. I think we ought to do this. Well, I think we ought to do that. And it's just chaos, corruption, and misery.
That's right.
And you're chasing your tail.
Yep.
So, that's a common theme, and I could have come up with 200 verses on that. But verse 7 is that this idea of surrender of chapter 10, that if anyone is confident that he belongs to Christ, he should consider again that we belong to Christ. Whenever the Bible starts repeating itself, you take notice, because then he says
you want it, we have it.
But we belong to Christ, which means the reason he brings up that I boast somewhat that freely about the authority the Lord gave us. The Lord is the one giving the authority, and this is the standard by which we operate. This is not my story. It's the Lord. I share the Lord. Whatever I'm doing him from Him. He's the one guiding this ship. He's the head of the church. You can go as many ways as you want to.
Don't you think that really speaks to why people want to belong? The one of the things the pandemic did, one of the things in Mom and Lisa's book and Sister Roar, was that it took away community in so many ways. Because all of a sudden, Everybody's worried and scared, so you can't meet with other people for whatever reason. I mean, not just spiritual stuff, but people do want to belong. I mean, they want to be a part of something, which is why even when it's a bad cause, people still get involved. Why? Because we're a part of something. So you see how the evil one uses that to his advantage. Well,
but it's not us. Once you, because they were attacking Paul, it wasn't him.
Right.
He was sharing his heart based on the Lord and what the Lord had done in his life, and he was. What did Paul preach? If you said, sum up what Paul's central message was in all his letters, what was his central message?
Christ and him crucified and raised from the dead.
Exactly. That's why he said First
Over
Corinthians
and
2.
over and over.
I just want you to know about Christ and him crucified. I don't want to know anything else. Well, people even in the church today find that so offensive.
Yeah.
I've been lashed out at because I said, if we can agree on Jesus, I'm good. People said, how dare you say such a statement? There's way more things that you have to figure out than that. I mean, we have the actual letters where people stopped what they were doing in life and wrote a letter and said, I cannot believe that you said you just wanted to agree on Jesus. Now, look, I think that is embarrassing for someone to write that because I got that from Paul, who got it from Christ himself.
But also, let's take a break. Also, Jace, there's no doubt these elite people or whatever was going on in the Corinthian community, they were like, why do we get like the lesser apostle? They didn't view Paul as equal with the others because he keeps defending himself over and over and over. He said, I know you don't think I'm a super apostle, but it was like, why do we get the flawed guy? That was their fight. They were looking at him and saying, well, we're just, we maybe we're okay with Jesus, which they really weren't.
Well, it wasn't like
he had a pretty tough background too.
Well,
which is why he goes through all that.
Let me get through this because I think you'll see what we're trying to say. So he sets it all up here in chapter 10. So he's like, these are God's arguments, God's power. Christ is the filter. We all belong to Christ. Then verse 13, he's like, God provides the platform. We mentioned this earlier. Yep. It says the second part of 13 of 10. Our boasting to the field God has assigned to us. We didn't pick a field that we're going to go out and do ministry. God assigned it. You notice in everything, there's a common theme here. We belong to Christ. It's his power, not ours. He assigned the field where we're at.
He wanted us here.
Then he gets to 15, 16. He gets to the big picture. No matter if you don't like me or not. Our hope is that your faith continues to grow. Our area of activity among you will greatly expand so that we can preach the gospel, which was the theme, Jesus, not him, in the regions beyond you. This is bigger than you.
You want to keep going?
This is trying to get the gospel to the world. So then verse 18, I think, well, really 17 and 18, is the theme of this challenge that they've missed. Because he says, but let him who boast in the Lord. You can't boast in yourself. Right. We're boasting about the Lord. And now I think this verse 18, to me, I saved it for last, our last section. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends.
Yep.
Same theme in 1 John 4.
Yep.
Love is not that you love God. People are like, what are you saying? I do love God. No, the Bible, the truth. I know my argument is right because I'm basing it on Scripture. It's not that you love God, but it is that God loves you. It's a different in perspective that once you get it, you won't be so high and mighty among yourself and the way you're looking, the way you're portraying yourself, that even in your weakness, even admitting your sins, you realize God, he flourishes in that situation because now you're relying on God's power, not yours.
Right.
The bottom line is you just can't do it yourself.
Right.
And people don't want to admit that. They don't want to admit they're wrong. They think they're smart enough to figure out every little detail from cover to cover of this Bible, and we somehow are going to find perfection. Well, we read about that. They're not viewing that as love. They're like, no, you got to be perfect. If you're not perfect, you're out. Well, guess what? We're all out. If you don't apply that to a spiritual principle, none of us
You
None
know
of
where
us
you
are gonna
see
make
that? You know where you see that a lot, Jay? It's a good illustration. Is you'll see a politician, they'll bring somebody up and they'll commend them and they'll talk
yeah.
about how great they are. And
Oh, yeah.
and but the whole time, it's really not to commend the person. It's to commend themselves, because they're saying, look
Yeah.
at me. I can recognize old average Joe here and really bring him out here. And it's all self-seeking. That's what he's talking about. That's the difference. It's not about you self-seeking. It's about God commending you as his servant. Which is,
So he reiterates the same comment in 11:30, because he says, now we're going to read what he said before in a minute, but he says in 11:30, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weaknesses. Because he just said, if I'm going to boast, I'm going to boast
in the Lord.
in the Lord. So it's okay to boast in my weaknesses, because then he tells you why. Because in verse 31, because the God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is to be forever praised, knows that I'm not lying. And I think that little statement shows you that he believes God is real. He believes that in his heart, he has a relationship with God, and God knows him, which he referred to in 1 Corinthians 8:3. Remember, he said the same thing about that we mentioned about love. He said, it's not about you knowing God as much as it is about
God
being known by God.
Right.
He said, the man who loves God is known by God, which seems like a riddle. You're like, what?
Yeah.
You're telling me it's not about me loving God, it's about God loving me? Yep. It's not about me knowing about God, it's about being known by God. Because if you know God knows you, then you'll quit these little games about presenting yourself as something that you're not and trying to cover up all this sinful behavior in your life, which we've already found out when we got to chapter 12. That's what was going on. They were saying, yeah, we're following Jesus. We're religious people. We have gifts from God. And yet our lifestyle was not going through the filter of Jesus. Because when you read his ministry, they had nothing in common with that. They were doing the exact opposite. They were being self-absorbed. They were indulging in whatever pleasurable thing. They were having difficulty dealing with any kind of obstacle. And that's just the difference in the standard.
And it was interesting that, let's take our last break. It was interesting, Jay says, he goes all the way back in 32 and 33 to the beginning. When he was first converted, they were out to get him. He was in Damascus.
Yeah.
And I mean, he literally had to be taken out in the night because they were already out to get him once he had that conversion. So he was a marked man from day one. Even Ananias didn't really want to deal with him. Remember, he was like, Lord, this is a bad hombre here.
Yeah.
So I think we should close with this section. So in 12:10, we're going to go backwards on this. He says something that's really difficult for people to get a handle on.
Yeah, most people would not make this statement.
Yeah, it says that is why, because he has a thorn in the flesh, and he gave the arguments that God's grace is sufficient and his powers made perfect in weakness, and I'll boast. Here's this boasting again. This is verse 9, but of 12. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I'm weak, I'm strong. And I think I've laid out from his writings a pretty powerful argument about this boasting in the Lord and embracing our frailty, our weakness, our mistakes, instead of trying to act like something you're not, or something this is something you can achieve on your own. And so when you back up, he plays this little game with them when he says in verse 18 of chapter 11, since many are boasting in the way the world does. So we just laid out the difference in the standards of the world. And you think about, what do people boast at in the world, about the world? All these physical surface things about how much money you have, or what you look like, or
position of power you're in.
your
Yeah.
accomplishments, your trophies. Look, I made a hole-in-one. I mean, you're like, great. What in the grand scheme of things? Now, look, I've made 2 hole-in-ones in my life. I was excited, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're looking at my casket and you're like, you remember that one time when he took this round ball and hit it with a stick? And they had dug a hole in
And
the
it went
ground,
in.
and it went in. What a thing to celebrate! Well,
What a thing that I can remember this dude by.
you can say, "Here's the ball," and I'm just laying there dead as concrete. It just seems pretty shallow. In that, did that offer anybody anything with substance? No. I would a whole lot rather you think about people. Through the grace of God.
I
and
heard
the
about
power-
your 2 holes in one, but I
Are
didn't.
you impressed, Dad?
No, I didn't even know that when I heard about it.
It's and I'm not making light. There's fun things we do along the way, but when you help somebody out or you bring somebody to the Lord, I mean that's God's power using Him using you as an ambassador to change someone's eternal destiny. Now that's something we can talk about. Yeah. Or to find a difficult situation or a kid without parents and help them, or an old widow lady, and all the different things that we do through the Spirit of God and other people's weaknesses and moments. That's what really matters. That's what He was trying to get them to see, but they were just only thinking of themselves.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so
the way I used to put it, Jason, when I preached all the time, did a lot of funerals, was live in such a way that it'll be so easy for guys like me to talk about you at your funeral, because it's going to be my job one day, and you can make that job easy or you can make that job difficult. It's up to you.
Exactly.
So that was just a challenge, how to live.
So he says this famous thing, and I got to read it because it's just, I think this is one, we said nobody really hangs out for the most part in 2 Corinthians 6 through 13.
But this is
But
a good read.
they
here.
do read this because it's fascinating.
It is.
Because they're not giving him any credibility, and he's trying to point people to Jesus, and they're talking about all their boasting and what they've done and their rhetoric and how articulate they are, and they have these super apostles. Who knows what they were doing? I guess they were magicians, and because he later on in chapter 12 and 12 said, look, the true things that mark an apostle are signs, wonders, and miracles. And I'm pretty sure that whoever this bunch was that was influencing them, they wasn't doing any miracles and wonders and signs, but it was a light show. It was masters of illusion, which the world is good at.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't think they are, they're standards of the world. You go to Vegas and you look around and you're like, this place is happening.
That's right.
I mean, what is it? It's miracles, signs, and wonders to somebody who don't know what a true miracle, sign, and wonder is.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing what's happening out there. But it's a worldly surface of the thing venture.
Right.
There's no meaning there. You'll lose all your money. It'll send you to rehab, and you could possibly get some disease pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Just think that's what's really going on. I mean, it'll break you.
Just like Jason, remember that joke of the guy they come in out of the woods, they never been to a city, and he goes and he's standing there with his son, and they're watching this elevator, and it opens up, and they're watching it close, and people are getting in, and they're like, what is it? And so they see this ugly old gal comes up, and she gets on there, doors close, she takes off, and they're just looking in wonder, and it comes back and opens up, and this beautiful woman gets off. And the guy looks around at his son and said, hey, boy, go get your mama. So, wonders, right?
Yeah, exactly. So look, so he says in 21 of 11, to my shame, I admit that we were too weak. So he's fixed to play this game and say, you know what, I'm going to do some boasting. What anyone else dares to boast about, I am speaking as a fool. I also dare to boast about. So he's like, I'm going to do some boasting. Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they Abraham's descendants? So am I. Are they servants of Christ? I'm out of my mind to talk like this. I'm more. He kind of goes on a side rant here.
He does.
Because he also says this earlier, remember in 2 Corinthians 4 when he said, if I'm out of my mind, or maybe it's chapter 5, I do it for the sake of Christ. Right. It's the same kind of terminology.
He starts with his pedigree. Yeah.
But then he said, so that's right. He says, I have the pedigree, And now look what I've done. I've worked harder. I've been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I've received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. I mean, you just think about the scars on his body. That was not you do some historical research on that. I mean, he's literally was.
And 5 times.
Beat to a pulp. And scars all over. 3 times I was beaten with rods. I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and day in the open sea. I've been on the move, been in danger from rivers, bandits, my own countrymen, Gentiles, in the city, in the country, at the sea, from false brothers. I have labored and toiled, gone without sleep, known hunger, thirst. I've gone without food. I've been cold and naked. And besides everything else, that was the physical side.
That was a lot.
I face the pressure of my concern for all the churches. So who is weak, and I do not feel weak, and who is led into sin, and I don't inwardly burn. So if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. That's why this phrase means more when he says, the God and Father of the Lord Jesus, who is to be forever praised, knows that I'm not lying. So
to the super apostles, they looked at each other and said, you have to admit, that's a lot.
That's pretty super.
Well, have you ever gone through something like that? And they would have to say, no, I don't. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the point is, they might have
why
looked
boys
the part.
falling into any of these stuff. Is this where y'all are? And
Well, you realize here that this guy's not an articulate guy. He's not a trained speaker. He looks like not even like a human. He's been butchered, beat.
He looks like 9 miles of muddy road.
He doesn't have a lot of money. He's been in prison, in and out of prison. Look, I meet the people that are in and out of prison. What's your first impression? Mm-hmm. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
And prison's rough. And all this stuff that he's gone through, they just couldn't get past what they were seeing.
Yeah.
They're like, this guy, he thinks Christ is speaking through him.
Yep.
He's a con. He's been in and out of prison. Yeah, you were there for the Lord. Up roll, eye roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, because look, it's always this fundamental argument that people make in life. If there is a God, well, how come he's let you go through all this? If God was for you, how come you've been beat? That's why this seems so foolish. They're like, right. This is impossible. Look at all us. We're all healthy, living off the land. We're in luxury.
But he got his orders from the one who appeared to him on the road to Damascus. And he's saying, it was a big deal for me. Big change the way I roll.
This is accurate.
That's why he said this, and we can explore this in bonus time. In Galatians 5, in an ironic book to where people tried to add something to the gospel, which he said, you're in danger of eternal damnation for doing that, so don't ever do that. But he got to the end in chapter 6 and 14, he says, may I never boast, Paul saying this, except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world. That's really what he was telling them.
Yeah,
I'm going to point you to Jesus. That's why he's the only one I want to know about, and that's all I'm going to boast about. But allow me to boast in these weaknesses, what I've gone through, that you're using as an excuse on why God is not with me.
Yeah, you're right. Let's unpack that a little bit more. We'll do that in Unashamed Overtime and kind of do our final wrap-up of Corinthians. That's blazetv.com/unashamed if you want to sign up for that and be a part of Blaze and catch our overtime segments. We'll see you there.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.